We do Wordle. So me, Charlie, and Aaron have our own little group. We're always competing who can get Wordle in the fewest words. And our cat's name is Daisy. And about a week ago.
Welcome to the City of Commerce Workshop. Howdy Listenby, City Manager.
Mayor, Council, thank you for the opportunity to do the workshop here in the council room instead of the conference room. Because of the topic and the impact it has on the community, we wanted the opportunity to stream and record this workshop because out of this workshop we'll develop a series of town hall meetings, and we wanted a resource for the community to go back and look at in advance of those meetings should they desire to. And so the agenda for tonight is quite simple yet complex. We're just going to talk about the strategic plan. That's the only item on the agenda for the workshop as it was presented. When Councilwoman Thompson got here, she said, "So what are we doing tonight?" And I said, "We're solving all the world's problems." So it's a simple agenda with a complex goal.
So where is she? You scared her off.
And so thank you for this opportunity. I want to start with what you see on the screen as we look at and begin to develop and continue the strategic plan for our community. We need to understand the context in which our community exists because you can't create a plan for the future without looking at and understanding the surroundings. And so as everybody knows, there's a population migration into Texas. And most of that population migration is focusing on the major metropolitan areas, Dallas-Fort Worth, Austin, San Antonio, and Houston. And so those metropolitan areas are seeing exponential growth, and that impacts the rural areas that are outlying and surrounding those metropolitans. And Hunt County is seeing that. It's already gone all the way through Rockwall County. Royce City has seen a population expansion quite rapidly. It has now moved past Royce City and into what I would call southwestern Hunt County. If you look at the development and the residential and commercial properties that are being constructed in that area of the county, the growth is astonishing. And that growth continues to migrate in our direction. And so we can see and learn from the challenges and the obstacles that communities like Caddo Mills, Royce City, some of these areas, the infrastructure challenges that they're facing. We've got time. We can learn from their mistakes and try to get ahead of that wave and be prepared, because what we don't know is what's the impact of this population growth going to be on the northern half of Hunt County. As you go down I-30 at Greenville, it's going to turn and go due east. And so is that population going to continue to follow I-30? Is it going to stop at Greenville? Farmersville is growing. Is that going to come into the western half, the northwestern area of Hunt County? We don't know. Ladonia is seeing the construction of a major reservoir. And so there's a lot of factors that are going to influence the population and the growth of our county. And we need to think through how is that potentially going to impact commerce. You may recall we did an agreement with the Retail Coach. It's a consulting firm that came in and did a market assessment for commerce and our primary retail trade area. And so what you see on the screen is larger than just commerce. Based on the data and the market analysis that we've collected, our retail trade area reaches down to I-30, comes up through Campbell and Cumbie and Neylandville, hits Commerce, but then stretches up to Cooper, Ladonia, Wolf City, Pecan Gap. And so we have a larger retail service area than just our city limits. And And so as we look at the growth and the plans for our community, yes, as an organization, we are tasked with serving the citizens that live within the city limits, but we have to be mindful of the context of the environment around our city as we go through this. Looking at some of the basic demographics of our retail service area, population in 2023 is estimated to be 24,679 people in that retail service area. And so most of the time people say, how big's Commerce? Well, the sign's supposed to say 9,090, but we are impacted by and we touch many more than 9,000 people. This market analysis, looking 5 years into the future for 2028, with a conservative growth of 2.6%, that would add another 651 people. Most likely in that service area, that growth is probably going to happen in Commerce. And so that's a conservative growth number, but we are going to continue to see growth as it impacts our community. If you look at some of the educational data for our community, 33% of our population have graduated high school, and another 24% have some college, but they haven't graduated with an undergraduate degree. So that tells you that the majority of our population are going to be traditional blue-collar workers, but we do have 23. If you look at the population distribution, it's pretty figures in the 2020 census, and they did capture some of the student population, but I would argue they didn't catch all of the student population. But at the other end of the spectrum, 65 years and older, 17% of our population are senior citizens. That is significantly outside of the norm for communities in Texas, and so we're kind of bookend in our community. We've got more than average number of 18 to 24-year-olds, and we have more than average number of senior citizens. So we are a diverse and interesting mix of community demographics. If you look at the income statistics in the bottom left, average household income is $72,000. The median is $54,000. So there's a pretty significant difference between the average and the median there. For those of us who are data nerds, that's significant because the majority of the households live closer to that median, but just a pure math analysis gives you that 72. That $72,000 is probably not representative of the majority of households in our community, and the per capita income is $29,000. And so again, these numbers are all below what would be considered averages for the state of Texas. They're even further below what would be averages for the DFW Metroplex. And so considering the demographics of the service area that we live in, that should influence the conversations we have, because how does that impact the City of Commerce? Understanding what those demographics are and who it is that we serve, we need to be mindful of the services that we offer or the services that we're planning, the cost of those services, and a lot of factors, because we exist to serve this community, and the better we understand the community that we serve, the better we are able to plan and provide those services. And so, if I may, I'm not plagiarizing this time because I'm citing my sources. Benjamin Franklin said in 1790, if you fail to plan, you are planning to fail. And we want to be an organization that sustains a high level of service and a high level of value for this community, and that requires us to plan. And that is the nature of a strategic plan, is to look 3 to 5 years into the future, see what we expect that future to be, what do we want that future to be, and then what are the things that we are going to do, actions we're going to take to move this community into that desirable future. And so we had a workshop with the council, brought in a consultant, and we talked about that vision, and we'll get to that in just a minute. But in addition to Benjamin Franklin, I will paraphrase a couple of others. I had a number of friends that served in the military, and they frequently said that no plan survives contact with the enemy. And so understanding that we're going to go to great effort to build a plan, and we're going to work that plan, and that plan's going to flex and change because reality doesn't follow our plan sometimes. Another quote, I can't remember who it's from, so I'm paraphrasing. Planning is important. Planning is vital. Plans change. And so that's an important distinction between the process of planning, building the muscle memory within your organization to plan, to go to the activity of planning, but then the written document that results has to change. It has to flex. It has to be able to flow with the reality that comes at us. And then finally, I've heard it said that success rarely happens on accident. It most often happens on purpose. And so the things that we do need to be planning for and looking at the future. I'm just still setting some context. The process of strategic planning in most organizations is going to call for or look for a mission statement, a set of values, and then a vision statement. And so we've worked through some of this process together, and it should influence and speak to the things that we plan and do. And so the mission is why we serve. Why are we here? Why do we do the things that we do? The values are how we serve. How do we work? How do we operate to accomplish these things? And the vision statement should be a snapshot of who we want to be when we grow up. Who do we want to become? And so for our community, our mission statement is we work together to build and maintain a community of the highest quality for present and future generations. That simply means that we exist to work. We are here to serve. Many times people think about the government, and that is not what comes to mind. When you think about the federal government, when you think about state government, there are a lot of broad paintbrushes that are used to paint the work and the effectiveness of government. We submit that local government is an entirely different animal, and we are by nature a service organization, and we exist to work. We work together. It's something that our staff is focusing on a great deal right now. But the work we do is to build and maintain a community. That requires that we have the courage to look forward and see what are the needs of this community and then build resources to serve those needs. But it also requires us to realistically look at the infrastructure we have and maintain that infrastructure. If you're always looking forward and you ignore the present, you're going to set yourself up for failure. So we build and maintain a community. You'll see, I've written it somewhere else, but I stole it. The house is the building. The home is the people that live in it. The city is the infrastructure. It's the physical location. The community is the people that live together. And we aren't here just to build a city. We're here to build a community and build an environment in which a community can prosper and grow. We want it to be of the highest quality, and we want it to be considered of today's generation as well as the generations to come. And that's why we are here. That's why we serve. The values, in the sense of how we do that, the mantra of our aspiration is to be responsive, to be effective, and to be accountable. That means as we serve, we're responsive. We meet citizens' needs in a timely manner. That's what we aspire to. Do we get it every day? No. We want to be effective. We want to meet citizens' needs completely the first time. That is our aspiration. Do we hit that every day? No. Sometimes we got to go back and redo the work. But accountable means we're measuring the performance to improve and repeat results. So when there's something going on, we show up. When we show up, we know what we're doing. And as we do the work, we're constantly getting better at how we serve this community. And then coming out of the workshop we had last year, this is a vision statement that is still a work in progress, but it is our attempt to capture the conversations and the intent that you had as elected officials when we look at the future of this community and who we want to be. The City of Commerce will be a vibrant, self-sustaining community where families can put down roots in the dirt and grass of a rural setting. They can raise their children safely, pursue a quality education, and still have access to the amenities of the DFW Metroplex without being surrounded by concrete. In attempts to capture the conversations and the intent of that retreat with the council, we figured that we heard that we wanted to maintain that rural feel. We don't want to become an urban suburb of the Metroplex. We want to maintain our identity as commerce, as rural, as small town feel, while still having opportunities that are afforded larger communities. And so that was the intent. This vision statement can still use some work, but that is where we are at in terms to capture that intent. So out of those things, you begin to develop a strategic plan. The goal is to be a document, I guess you could say a living document, that outlines a series of goals and objectives that are intended to move the organization towards the realization of that vision statement. It should be developed within the context of the environment and the reality around us. And so we don't want to create a bunch of hopes and dreams on stuff that will never happen, but we also don't want to bury our heads in the sand and pretend like everything's going to be okay. We got to look at the context, we got to look at the future, and then we got to go to work. And that is the intent. So through that workshop, the council identified a series of objectives that we are now trying to build a strategic plan around. These objectives right now are not listed in any kind of order of importance, but I would think during the town hall meetings that we have with the community, there will be opportunities for us to get feedback from the community. If there's any that the community feels are more important than the other, we'll get a sense of value and importance from the stakeholders. But in quick review, and then we're going to dive into each one of those. Develop new revenue streams, develop sustainable infrastructure corresponding to growth. We want to establish and maintain a long-term identity. We want to improve the quality of life and improve the appearance of the city. And so these are the goals or the objectives that you as the elected officials identified and handed to us as the appointed staff. And it is our job as staff to identify the action items, the work that we're going to perform to support each of these objectives and move this community forward. Before we dig into each one of these objectives, Mayor, Council, are there any questions or comments?
Yes, of course. We have at the very beginning, we have plan of 2024 to 2026. Are we talking fiscal year or calendar year?
Yes. It could be either one. We're planning fiscal year.
Okay.
Because the strategic plan should identify how we're going to allocate resources, and we do that within a budget or fiscal year. And so when I say 24, I'm talking October of 23 through September of 24. The intent is fiscal years.
And probably we should just put it in there, this fiscal year, so we can have that. And then just as we're going through this, I'd like to just put forward to everybody that after reviewing all this, if you'll look at the pillar number 3, establish and maintain a long-term identity, and then you look at the last one, improve the appearance of the city, we may think about maybe wanting to combine those. But that's just something for thought as we're talking about these.
Taking notes. Thank you for that.
Any other questions? Okay.
All right. Mayor and Council, you should each have a hard copy of a draft of a strategic plan document. And so that is the document that we'll use to walk through these next series of slides. So the first objective on the list is to develop new revenue streams. And some of what I want to accomplish in this workshop is, as we kind of bring clarity to what the focus is that you feel we should have, our next move is then to communicate that so that the community knows and understands what we're going after. And so I want to talk through and think through how do we best communicate what we mean when we say develop new revenue streams. Because there's 5 people on the dais, and all 5 of you could have 5 different ways to explain what you mean by develop new revenue streams. And sometimes I think it's helpful for us to have an elevator pitch, and that is if you're stuck in an elevator and someone says, what do you mean, develop new revenue streams? You already have at your fingertips some things you can say to bring clarity to what the intent there is.
Am I allowed to carry cards like the president does?
You can, yes. And so, as we walk through the slide you see on the screen, the first 2 words for every one of these are going to be the same, because the intent is we are going to take action. And so as I heard you talking about developing new revenue streams, what we heard, what we understood, is that we're going to take actions that develop revenue and funding sources from external agencies, external stakeholders, and visitors, so that local taxpayers are not being hit for everything. There's a tremendous amount of investment that is needing in infrastructure for this community, and we've already established we have a economically challenged population. Median household incomes, per capita incomes are definitely on the low side of statewide averages, and if we ask our residents to pay for all of the infrastructure investment that's needed, I don't believe that's sustainable. That requires us to bring other revenue sources to the table to help support the infrastructure investment that's needed. And so is that a fair evaluation of what your intent was within this objective?
I believe so. I believe so. Anybody else?
Sounds good to me.
Right on.
All right. So then on page 3, we start looking at this objective. I'm using a model called OKRs, Objectives and Key Results. And it's the intent is to, you've identified the objectives. We as staff are now going to identify what are the key results that we're working towards. And it is our job to deliver these key results so that we can accomplish the objective together. And so through conversation with you, the council, and with staff, we've come up with some proposed action items. Key result number 1 would be develop meaningful festivals and events at least quarterly. As an example, spring, summer, fall, and winter. The intent would be that these events are intended to draw visitors and vendors into the community. This will provide an economic boom of external dollars in the form of sales and sales taxes. And so that is something that was discussed in the workshop, and we've heard several times from you. That would be a key result that we focus on, is working with the community to develop these festivals and events. Does that sound consistent with your intent?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Would you be looking, of course, they haven't been identified at this point, but an event that occurs, the same event that occurs as long as it's working, like every spring,
Yes.
keeping that same event and not
We don't have to
switching.
recreate the wheel every year.
Yes, we would like, in my opinion, they need to
I
be
think so.
predictable.
Right.
Yes.
Predictable and repeatable.
The brief amount of research that we've done so far, the market for this is changing. I've been in this business 23 years. 20 years ago, when a community was talking about this, everybody wanted to be like Canton, and everybody wanted a trades day, and they wanted some reason for all these people to come buy stuff. The market's really changing anymore with the advent of online shopping. You can buy whatever you want and whatever you need without leaving home. Data shows that has replaced these big community shopping events. A few communities can pull it off, but it's really hard to break into that market now. And the focus of the event is retail buying stuff. The market now is an experience. You want to have an experience that people will come for, and while they're there, they buy stuff. But if the experience is just a place to buy stuff, those don't work as well anymore. And so the festivals and events that we need, in my opinion, need to partner with other people within the community, partner with the university, and we need to create events that are experienced, and as attached to that experience, they will buy stuff. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
And so that needs to be, and this is an action item that I don't believe the city staff alone can accomplish. We're going to have to work with other entities in the community to create and pull these off.
Do you have any thoughts on those events? I mean, what that might look like, what kind of festival? I mean,
If it was up to me, they would all be blues and barbecue. But it's not all up to me.
So,
I happen to know a young lady in the audience that is a phenomenal quilter, and they're already talking about some kind of quilt event, which I think could be cool. I'm not going to go build a quilt, but I would love to watch the people that do. There's a lot of diverse talent and opportunity within this community. And I think for the experience to be authentic, it needs to come out of the members of the community that are passionate about these things.
a craft fair was suggested to me. Also, a songwriters festival was suggested to me.
I also have, using the connection with Brad Davis, a music festival.
I see that being very advantageous.
I also wondered, and I've got Quilt Show on here, I also wondered about some type of children's festival. We have the Children's Museum, we have the Planetarium, we have the Splash Park, we've got good parks, something that we could do for a children's festival.
I think that's an incredible idea.
Just as long as it had experiences, whatever those look like,
Mhm.
yes.
Yeah.
Going
And
to the
I think
children's
leveraging the Children's Museum would definitely be an asset that we
And I think
have
the
that very few communities do.
Planetarium, I mean, just a day of it, having a schedule,
Yeah,
maybe, but
agreed. Excellent point. All right. Closely associated with that, key result number 2, because it is highly competitive to have people come to your community for these events and these experiences, there are consultants and marketing people that specialize in the development and the promotion of these festivals. It's not like Field of Dreams, build it and they will come. We could have a fantastic idea and build an incredible festival, and nobody knows about it, and nobody comes. And so would there be any interest in exploring and researching what's the process and potentially what's the cost of bringing a consultant in so that we design it in ways that are going to be competitive in this market and that helps us identify how to promote it?
I think that's necessary.
I do
Just-
too.
yeah.
Absolutely.
because we'd be doing the same old, just
And the
hitting
same
our
people
area.
Yeah, the same
continuously,
10% would be
same
doing-
10%,
Yeah.
All the work.
and we're banging our heads now.
All right. Key result number 3, research grant funding opportunities and apply for at least 2 grants. This is something of low-hanging fruit because we're already working on these. And so there is a method and a reason why we put as one of our key results something that we're already working on. Because if we make a commitment to the community that we're going to do these things, and then it takes 12 months for anything to show up, you lose momentum. And so now that we're in the new calendar year, we've got a couple of grants identified that we're going to be going after, and you'll be hearing about those in our regular meetings this month. And so, but it's going to be important that we look for and identify grant resources. Most of the infrastructure needs that we have are eligible for external funding, federal and state dollars. Some of those are going to be interest-free grants. Some of those are going to be low-interest financing. We need all the help we can get from external agencies for the major infrastructure investments that we have. And so finding grants to support those programs are going to be critical. Included with this is going to be grant consultants such as GrantWorks. Charles Edwards has been our grant consultant for years here. He now works for GrantWorks. There's going to be agencies like that that help us identify, write, and submit those grants in ways that are successful. The process of submitting a grant is very labor intensive, and the way in which we are staffed right now, we don't have a full-time person on our staff that just sits around and writes grants. And I don't think we have the budget to hire someone full-time to sit around and write grants. But these consultants will do that, and then their payment comes out of the proceeds of the grant. So it's low impact to the taxpayers, high return on investment in bringing external dollars in. And so we're proposing to be more aggressive at looking for grants and grant opportunities as part of this objective. Any questions on that?
Why did we put a number to it?
Just so that it's quantifiable. Some of these are developed meaningful festivals, but there's not a measurable way. I mean, we can set a measure. Do you want 4 festivals in a year? I was just attempting to put something that's quantifiable so that there's a measure that we can.
Well, this is 3-year plan. So
Right.
should we be saying at least try to look at 2 per year?
We can do that.
I think that's where you're going.
What
Or
if there's,
more.
what if there's not a, well, more is, doesn't
Yeah.
have to be said.
Yeah.
But what if there's not the opportunity for 2?
Well,
guess
these
I'm not
2
gonna
we
say.
know we got.
We do this year,
Yeah.
Yeah.
but we may not next year.
Well, and part of this speaks to the accountability of what should be these key results. If we commit to go out and identify grants and we get 2 in the first year, and in the second year we don't apply for any grants, in the third year we don't apply for any grants, there needs to be some accountability tied to that. These are actions that we are committing to take, and there should be some form of measurement. I identified 2 just as a way to start the conversation about measuring it.
My concern was, what if there's not 2 available in a year?
There are definitely more than 2 available. Whether we actually get them or not remains to be seen. But there's lots of grant opportunities out there.
But at least applying for 2 is,
Yeah. Do you want to say at least 2 per year
I do.
as a
Yep.
goal? Another reality is that we'll revisit this every year, probably during our budget process, and update what these key results are. Key result number 4, promote economic development through residential, retail, and industrial growth. Our tax base needs some diversification, and that's going to require investment from developers that aren't here right now. And so we need to have a toolkit that is available so that we can work with developers and make commerce an attractive place, a desirable place to invest. And so that's the intent behind this, is using 380 agreements, using the tools that we have in our disposal to recruit. We've been working with the retail coach. We've got a list of retail establishments that are actively looking at our community right now. And we need to be able to reel those fish in when they hit the lure. It's a really bad analogy because I'm not a fisherman, so I may have butchered that, but this needs to be a priority. That make sense? Questions? I think I'll stick to sports analogies.
Thanks.
Key result number 5, implement the downtown master plan, including the farmers market area. I think it was a good boost and a good momentum for our community that we completed the downtown master plan. We didn't get the grant from TxDOT, but that doesn't stop us from implementing that plan. And so we continue to move forward and look for funding opportunities. I think implementing the downtown master plan is going to be critical in the drive to develop new revenue streams. If we improve the infrastructure, the sidewalks, the ADA accessibility in our downtown areas, those buildings that are currently vacant become more attractive for investment because the buildings exist in a desirable environment now. and that's something that we're going to continue to work on. The farmers market area would transform that city-owned property into something that can be used economically more throughout the entire year, rather than the limited resource that it is at this point in time. Thoughts or questions on that? Number 6, develop phase 1 of the police impound yard. This is a project that y'all approved some initial funding for. We've identified a property. We're getting quotes to begin the development of an impound yard. If you have questions, I may defer to Chief Belitz. But during the course of enforcement, specifically drug enforcement, there are seizures of assets, of vehicles, that allows our police department to recover funding from those drug seizures. And it requires the facilities so that when you have those seizures, specifically vehicles, you have a place that you can safely store them. We do not currently have a seizure yard, and so there's been many opportunities that we had that possibly could have involved seizures that we passed up because we didn't have the appropriate facilities to maintain those safely. The impound yard opens that opportunity. I am not saying that we're going to run around town seizing assets so that we can make money off of it. That's not what I'm saying. But I am saying that there is money that we've not been able to benefit from because we didn't have the proper seizure yard. And so
Meaning just meaning an enclosed lot, building,
ultimately, it will be a fenced-in, secured property with a building. With the funding we have right now, I don't know that we can enclose it, fence it, improve the surface, and get a building with a concrete slab with the funding we have. We're researching that. But phase 1 definitely creates a secured yard that we have controlled access to, that we can impound vehicles and maintain control over those vehicles.
do you have any idea off the top of your head how much money revenue has been seized in a year, or what we have turned down, or the potential?
You know what we have in seizure funds right now?
For the police, right.
Yep. Chief, do you have any insight? Okay. Other questions?
Would there be any type of partnership with the University Police Department?
Do they have a seizure yard?
I don't believe they do. I don't know what kind of seizure program they have.
It's gonna open up both departments.
Yeah. We're definitely interested. Yeah.
Is there any other facilities that we could partner with, and I'm just throwing this out, that already has a lot like that, say Benson Brothers in an area? Is that feasible if there is someone you could partner with that already has a facility?
I may defer to the chief, but it's my understanding that we have to maintain chain of custody and control. And so if we delegated that to a wrecking yard, we violated that chain of custody and control.
Okay.
Adjudicated. And wrecker yards charge you. We don't want to pay to have it housed there for an extended period of time.
I think the nearest true seizure yard is gonna be in, as far as I can, it's Greenville.
So again, we don't list this as we're going to start running around town seizing assets as a way to make money off the community. No, but when there is criminal activity and our police department is involved in the enforcement of that criminal activity, there's resources available that our police department should benefit from. Finally, under this one is required developers to provide utility infrastructure extensions. This exists whether we identify it or not. We don't need this listed in a strategic plan in order to do this, but part of the strategic plan is a communication tool. And some communities as they extend water mains, sewer mains, and street infrastructure, the current residents are worried that they are going to have to pay for all of this new infrastructure that's going in. And that typically is not how it's done. Case in point with the Bloomfield development over at East Oak Creek, they constructed all of the streets. They constructed all of the stormwater infrastructure. They constructed all of the water mains, and they constructed all of the sewer mains. So all of that infrastructure was put in by the developer. We did a 380 development agreement with them to participate in the cost of water and sewer, because those lines generate revenue for our utility. And so we did an evaluation of what's the future revenue stream off of the accounts created by that water and sewer system, and then net present valued into an amount in which we would participate, so that the development is paying us back for our participation in the infrastructure. But for streets, the developer paid 100% of the cost of those new streets. The developer paid 100% of the cost of that stormwater infrastructure. And so once we have momentum in the development within this community, typically developers pay all of the cost of that infrastructure. We have the opportunity to use 380 agreements should we feel it's advantageous, and we will continue to use that tool because we want to diversify and increase residential development and commercial and industrial development. But as a general rule, new development should pay its own way rather than ask the current citizens to pay and subsidize this new development. And so that's the nature of that statement. I know some of y'all had some questions about what that particular line meant. Did I answer those questions, or are there other comments or concerns?
Well, when you explained number 4, you were talking about the 380s and everything.
Yes.
And I see this as just a part of that.
Agreed.
So maybe we shouldn't have it separated out. Maybe
Okay.
it should go up underneath there, so that if we decide to go a 380 versus something else with someone, we're not forcing ourselves. It's really more like a policy instead of an action item. My thoughts.
That's easy.
Any other questions?
Any other ideas or thoughts before we move away from developing revenue streams? When we go into the town hall meetings, there will be opportunities for the public to speak to each of these objectives. I would expect some people are going to have lots of ideas how to accomplish this, and we will receive that and filter through all that feedback. We may discover some gems that we didn't think about, pun intended. You're welcome, Jim.
I'm used to it.
All right.
One thing that I think that I asked you and Jamie, on food trucks,
Mhm.
is where the sales tax goes. I think after a little research that I did, and maybe y'all did as well, that the sales tax goes to
To this community.
the community that is set up. Are we currently, or can you identify that that money is coming in from sales tax from any? Okay,
In that confidential report, I can look up the actual vendor,
uh-huh,
and I can see when they paid in that.
and see that it's,
See who paid us and when they paid. There's also if they decide that they want to choose that, category for mobile food, I think it's mobile food unit is what it's called. But if they choose that, then we can also look at that category as a whole and see how that affects commerce.
so any type of festival, any type of event, let's just say the Boat Art Bash.
Yeah,
D-
usually
d-
after the boat art dash, I always check that one 2 months later.
Uh-huh.
We'll see it come in 2 months later, and it's always increased.
Okay,
So that's one of those ones that I'm really interested in. Curious to see how it compares year to year.
You're a data nerd too. You're a data nerd also.
If you look up data nerd in the dictionary, it's her picture that's there. So
Next to yours.
yeah. All right, next objective is to develop sustainable infrastructure corresponding to growth. What we mean here is to take actions that will restore and preserve existing community infrastructure, as well as expand the community infrastructure to support present and future generations. And this is a mouthful. And infrastructure, what I've got on paper is more than just physical infrastructure. It includes community infrastructure. And that may be a point of conversation for us to have tonight. Because most people, when you say infrastructure, they think the physical water, sewer, streets, the physical things that create a city. There is other infrastructure that creates a community. And do we want to lump all that together, or do we want to separate that? But walking through this objective, key result number 1 is complete a water master plan, identify a long-term water source, and develop a multi-year CIP. We've already engaged an engineer to help us create that water master plan. But if you look at what is going to happen in Hunt County in terms of growth, water is going to be a major factor in where and how this county grows. And Commerce is uniquely situated because we have access to more water than we need as a community. That puts us in the role now as a regional water supplier, which is a very envious position to be in. But we have to have a water master plan so that we clearly know what our water needs are now and into the future, so that we know what we conserve for us and what we can use to help resource other communities and other development within the county. And all of that is hinging on a water master plan, which we've engaged an engineer and started that process already. But identifying that long-term water supply is going to be critical for not just our community, but for the entire county as well. And again, we've already started on that project, but it is very strategic in what we're doing. Any questions on that one?
Isn't that exactly what happened to maybe Caddo Mills? They can't supply water to any more people, or?
Yes, I would say that's probably some of it, but I don't know that Caddo, I haven't researched this, so I don't know, but I don't believe Caddo has their own independent source of water. I think they're dependent on other water providers. I don't think they have their own water supply. That's where we are unique, in that we have our own supply. We're not dependent on anybody else for our water.
When you said community infrastructure, what were you talking about?
Primarily in this document, public safety, because as we look at fire, as we look at emergency services, as we look at police infrastructure, one of the fundamental things we do as a local government is public safety. And when I look at the 5 objectives that we have in this plan, public safety doesn't clearly fit into any of them, but we can't forget and overlook public safety. You can have the greatest park in the world, and if it's not safe, you didn't win. And so there's some non-physical infrastructure stuff in this particular item in 5, 6, 7, 8.
I think anytime you're going to say infrastructure, people are going to think road, sewer, if it's physical. If there's another terminology,
Well, you said it, community services instead of infrastructure. If we just use that word in our beginning, it says finding their community services and able to keep up with the growth.
Okay.
We could use that. Then everything under there falls easily without having to set up another pillar.
Result 2, complete the renovations to the water treatment plant necessary to restore production capacity. We are on track to finish the filter rehabs here in the next couple of months, and that will restore full capacity of the treatment plant at the filter and the clarifier stage of the treatment process. However, there's still some additional work necessary for us to sustain production. And so we've identified a couple of those projects, one of those being a groundwater storage tank that's currently in our CIP. But the Water Master Plan will also identify some other projects that we'll need to have in mind as the community grows. As an example, on paper, the plant is rated for 3 million gallons a day. That is plenty of capacity for commerce as it exists right now, and even some, I would say, moderate growth in the next 3 to 5 years. 3 million gallons a day is not going to be enough capacity for us long-term, 10, 20 years from now, if the county continues to grow in the northern half of Hunt County, because we will be the water provider. And so that means we won't just be treating water for commerce, we'll be treating water for northern Hunt County. And so there are going to be some population triggers at which we need to look at expanding that treatment plant. That will all be identified as part of our Water Master Plan. But the plant we have today, there is still work that needs to be done so that we have sustainability there at that piece of infrastructure. And so that's the intent of key result number 2. Any questions on that
Is
one?
the university still in the actively acquiring land all around our town?
I don't know. I don't believe so. I'm not aware of any land acquisitions that they've done recently.
They're selling off several
but
pieces.
They've actually moved into starting to develop some of those properties. I don't think they're acquiring more, but I'd
It
have to
just
ask
seems like
them.
it'd be a race. If they acquire some, we grow. They acquire, and the tax rate would just,
It's a unique situation for our community. Key result number 3 is similar to number 2. It's complete the renovations to the wastewater treatment plant necessary to restore treatment capacity. A couple of months ago, we took a tour and we went out to the wastewater treatment plant. If you'll recall, the rated capacity of that plant right now, we are not treating at that volume. One, because volumes really aren't requiring us to yet, but that treatment plant has not aged well. And so we're in the middle of some projects to bring some renovations and restoration to that plant. We can treat the water for our community as it exists today. If we grow much at all, then we're at risk of not having the capacity to treat it because of the condition of the plant today. With some rehab and renovations, then the plant has enough capacity to handle growth over the next 5 years, maybe 10 years, depending on what our growth pattern is. But at some point, if this community continues to grow, if the university campus continues to grow, then we will need to look at expanding the capacity of that plant as well. But there are definitely some projects that are right in front of us that are strategic and of great importance. Thoughts or questions on that one? All right. Key result number 4, continue the street maintenance and street reconstruction programs. Within the first year of the street maintenance fee, we use some of that funding to get an updated inventory and evaluation of our street conditions. Right at the end of the year, we were given an online GIS tool that we'll begin to use to communicate and educate the community on our street network. What are the conditions of those street networks? And then that will be the foundation in which we build our street maintenance program and the tools and the activities we will have to maintain and improve the condition of residential streets. But we also have the street reconstruction program of our thoroughfares and our more highly trafficked streets. Both of those programs need to continue to move forward. That will be a key point to the growth and the condition of the current community and as it expands. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself. Questions on street maintenance or street reconstruction? Number 5 is to complete a comprehensive plan update. And it's included in this infrastructure item. You're going to see the comprehensive plan a lot tonight, because it really does take a deep look 20 years into the future, and looks at what are realistic population projections, and then what is our response need to be based on what those population growth scenarios happen. Infrastructure clearly is part of that. We've already worked on a water master plan. The comprehensive plan will include a brief look at transportation. And so as this community grows and as the population both of the community and the count of traffic coming through our community, we have to be mindful of where and how that transportation is going to happen. You'll see a lot of communities, rural communities north of the Dallas and Fort Worth Metroplex, that they've been run over with traffic and they didn't have a thoroughfare plan, and traffic is just insane. You've got to have a plan of how you're going to route traffic and how you're going to move them, and that usually is in the form of a thoroughfare plan. Our comprehensive plan doesn't include right now a full thoroughfare plan. That would be a phase 2 after we've got some reasonable population projections. But also thoroughfare plans, they're a little bit different animal, because you're looking at, if we grow to the east, where are we going to put major thoroughfare streets? Well, that land right now is vacant agricultural land, and people don't like talking about, you're going to cut right through the middle of my agricultural land and put a street here in the future. People don't like having those conversations, but it is essential that we have those conversations so that we at least have a development plan, so that we know that if 15 years from now this big open agricultural lot ends up in a development agreement and someone's putting a subdivision in there, we require the developer to dedicate right-of-way in this space so that we have a place to put a street. If we don't have a thoroughfare plan, then that development just happens and we haven't got a strategy for moving traffic around. And so all of that comes out of a good comprehensive plan. Key result 6, this is where I start talking about community infrastructure rather than just physical infrastructure. Develop a fire apparatus and equipment replacement plan. As the community grows, we have to have the capacity to respond to emergencies. We have to have the capacity to fight fires. That's connected to the water system. And so we need to look at the equipment we have today. What is its age? When is it going to be up for replacement? Do we have a funding strategy for that replacement? But at what point of population growth do we need to look at adding a new piece of equipment or adding a new fire station? You need to be thinking forward into the future about these public safety issues. I submit that is just as important infrastructure as the water line that provides the water to fight the fire. We can have a water line there and no fire truck. I think we failed to the community in terms of infrastructure. So if we change it to community services instead of infrastructure, I think that is a smoother transition. But we need to be mindful of, as the community grows, the service that we provide. If we're not paying attention, the fire department doesn't grow as well, and then you're having more calls with the same amount of staff, more calls with the same amount of equipment, which wears the equipment out faster, which then has higher costs to the taxpayer. And so we need a plan. We need to be thinking through the impacts of that, and that needs to be part of our strategy. Questions on that?
Just interesting how a couple of days ago, our station and a few others had to go assist that fire in Greenville.
Mhm.
But that really can't be avoided sometimes.
Yeah.
That has nothing to do with the size of their department, I presume.
No, most communities around have a mutual aid agreement, and so it's just built into the way things are done in terms of fire services. Number 7 is complete phase 1 of the fire training field expansion project. Again, there's some money in our current budget to start that program. Currently, our firefighters have to go to other agencies to do hands-on training. There's a limited amount of training that we do ourselves, but we've got the property. We've got some basic ability to do some training, and we're going to increase and improve the amount of training that can happen so that we have a higher level of training for our emergency staff and other entities can come to us to conduct training, which also provides some economic benefit.
I was gonna say, do we pay these other agencies to use their facility? And if,
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. It depends on what the specific training is, but there are costs associated. Yeah. Number 8, conduct a full interagency emergency management tabletop event. Too many communities find out what they can and can't do in the middle of an active emergency. And we do not want to be one of those news stories. We have multiple agencies that work together in this community between the county, the school, the university, and the city. And we need to have an interagency training working together. And so a tabletop is everybody's in a room and you say, okay, here's the emergency that happens. What do we do? And you just start working through all the impacts of that emergency. Who has what equipment? Where's it coming from? Who's going to play what role? We need to have those training events now, not in the middle of a live emergency. And so we've talked about tabletop exercises for the past probably 2 years. We just need to pull the trigger and execute one.
So if that's what we need to do,
Yeah.
why does it need to be a strategic goal? Why isn't it just an action item?
Well, we need to take action. And so if it's something that we've been talking about but we haven't done, then it needs to be important for us to actually take action. And if we put it in a document like this, it increases the level of accountability. But it also communicates to the citizens that this is something that we take serious, and it is front and center in our mind in the work that we do. And so if we change this objective to community services rather than just infrastructure, our ability to respond effectively to emergencies is an essential community service, a community infrastructure. And it needs to be something that we actively work on. And so I list it as a key result or an action item because I want us to be accountable for taking action on this.
Didn't we have something like this in place before? Years back?
How long has it been since we've done a tabletop around here?
The emergency management part of it.
I think another big part of it is it's really not just the city, it's you have to do this level of, exercise, you would include the hospitals, universities, other stakeholders, so it's bigger than just us at this level.
But didn't we used to come together years ago with the university hospital? One of the reasons we built that part of the police and fire department was for that. We had us set up for it. Yes. I remember having the shooting at Walmart, and that's what the meeting place was, because everybody was, so we've done this before.
And we need to do it again
I agree.
and again and again. I have a management resource that I've used for years to learn and grow my management skill set called Manager Tools. And Mark Horstman is the guy that started it. And so he has Horstman's laws of this and Horstman's laws of that. You probably know the one I'm fixing to quote. Horstman's Christmas law is the things that are really, really important, but you only do once a year, you suck at it. His words, not mine. And so if you only do that process once a year, then when it's the most critical, you're not going to be good at it. And so you need to practice and you need to rehearse those skills before the time comes so that when you need it the most, you're at your best. And emergency management and public safety is one of those areas that we have to be training and we have to be working together with other agencies so that we serve this community well when it needs it the most.
So, kind of go with what Teddy was saying. This sounds like it's a one-time thing.
It should not be.
So, right, And so maybe it needs to be written in a way that that we will conduct
Yeah.
these tabletop events and have it on a regular basis or something. You know, what,
I think we would be,
I think
we are
that's
in an
where we
area
are.
that we're susceptible to tornadoes. That be, I mean, just our location would be,
Agreed.
is that where you were going?
Let's just do it.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. And some of these are intended to be action items that we did this one, but next year during budget process, when we review these,
We'll need to-
we'll add more to them as we go. The final one for infrastructure is complete the aviation fuel and an AWAS project for the Commerce Municipal Airport. Again, this is a project we've been talking about since before I got here. AWAS is a new conversation that we've had with the airport board. Advanced weather observation, or is it automated weather? And so pilots that are flying into our airport right now, they have to look at either the Sulphur Springs or the Greenville or the Paris weather conditions. Those weather conditions may not be reflective of the winds and the conditions in Commerce. And so that limits the functionality and the availability of our airport to be used. And so we now have some funding available for the airport that is more than enough to cover an AWAS project. But we want to identify that the airport is infrastructure. It is something that can be used in economic development. There is a benefit for a community having an airport, and this airport has been under-resourced and underutilized for a really long time, and we felt like it was important that it, as an asset, is identified in the strategic plan. It's another festival.
Is our comprehensive plans going to identify some strategic goals for the airport?
I'll have to go back and see if that's included. I don't
Because
know off the top of my head.
This is more of an action item than a strategic goal.
Yes, these are all action items.
Yeah, but when I think strategic, I'm thinking 3 to 5 to 10 to 20. So is our comprehensive plan going to look at what our airport could be or needs to be in 10 years from now or something like that?
I don't think this, from that point of view, no, I don't believe it does. TxDOT Aviation is the extension of FAA that manages general aviation airports. And every general aviation airport has an airport layout plan that looks out into the future as what are the needs for that airport as it grows and expands. One of the challenges, though, is the FAA is not dedicating any funding to expansions for general aviation airports. And so if we're going to expand, for example, the runway of our airport, we have to tackle that without any support from TxDOT Aviation or FAA. And that is a major capital investment. But to comply with FAA regulations, there is an airport layout plan, and we have one of those. It's been adopted. But it doesn't have major goals and objectives for it, no.
Along those lines, the folks that are going to be completing the comprehensive plan, do they have the opportunity, or are they planning to take the opportunity to meet with the university and see if there's any kind of correlation with our growth comprehensive plan and the universities?
We've included some of those conversations, yes. Any other questions or thoughts on infrastructure or community services? Establish and maintain a long-term identity. This one was a little more challenging to come up with tangible things that we could do, but we've taken a stab at it. Take actions that establish a reputation as a desirable community for families, for education, for jobs, and for investment. To me, your long-term identity is your sense of identity, but also creating a reputation of being a desirable community. And so are there things that we as a staff can do to help move this forward, or is this an objective that needs more than just city staff to work on? Key result 1 is the possibility of researching and considering engaging a marketing and branding consultant. A lot of communities I'm going to tell you straight up, I'm not a marketing major. I took some marketing classes, but that was not the focus of my degree, and I'm not going to pretend to be a marketing expert. But when you want to start influencing the reputation or the identity of an organization, you need some real clear thought from a marketing and promotion point of view. How do we position ourselves as a product in the minds of consumers? And local governments and cities usually don't think like that. But our community is a product. We want our community to be something that is desirable for consumers, people. We want people to be interested in moving here. We want businesses to be interested in coming here. We want industry interested in making investments here. And so that means we as a community, as a product, need to be desirable. There's some branding involved in that. And I don't have the confidence that you have staff right now that specialize in that. And so is this something that you would want to consider talking to some consultants about, at least a very superficial level, to find out what's that process look like, what's it involved in, what are the potential costs? I was in another community. It was a fun experience because the city was not the lead. There was a downtown business association that raised some money, brought in a consultant, and did this big branding campaign. And it flopped. It didn't work well. And everybody bagged on the city. Why'd the city waste all this money? Why'd the city do this? Why'd the city do that? The city didn't have anything to do with it at all. And so there's some risk with the branding initiative, because if it doesn't work, people will let you know. But if we're going to work on a long-term identity and a branding, we can do it on our own, or we can do it with some help. This may be a unique partnership with the university. There might be some capacity within the university and their programs to work on this, but it's something that's going to require some time and research.
Well, I think getting some help is certainly something that we need. An example that happened to Teddy and I, when they had the bowl games here a couple of weeks ago, what was it?
The first weekend in December.
Yeah, first weekend in December. There were a lot of people at Muggs that were coming and going to the game, and a guy came up to Teddy and I, and he said, "Are you mayor?" or "Hello, mayor." And anyway, we were talking.
I'd already been fingered. So.
He was visiting downtown, and he came downtown to the coffee shop, and he wanted to know where Big Mac the tree was, because that's everything that comes up when you're searching commerce is the boat art capital of the world, and where's Big Mac? Nobody could tell him.
And still couldn't.
It still couldn't. And that's everything that's about this community is, the boat arc. And so I think we definitely need to move a little bit away from the boat arc.
And I would like to suggest that we do the research and see if we can find some other communities that have used a consultant. I think that's a great idea, the consultant. Mm-hmm. I'd rather defer to somebody that a community has utilized and been successful than reaching out to the university.
Yeah, okay.
Because I do have a marketing degree, but no experience in this. So.
The only thing I remember from my marketing class is my intro to marketing, Professor Moritz, and he beat within us the 4 Ps of marketing: price, product, promotion, and distribution. But those were the 4 Ps. In every test you took, you had to identify the 4 Ps of marketing, in which there were 3 and a D. But that's why I remember it, and that's the extent of my marketing knowledge. Key result number 2, again, we're going to see the comprehensive plan, specifically land use planning. Within the comprehensive plan, there will be an evaluation of the current land use, and then a discussion about future land use. And where this comes into play, it can be somewhat controversial, and there's debate on whether it works or not. But if you're establishing a long-term identity and you don't want to be urbanized, then you can create a land use plan that does not allow zero lot line patio homes, as an example. Because if you don't identify the land use that you're willing to embrace as a community, developers will come in and they'll build whatever makes them the most money. And that developer is not going to care about your sense of community identity. And if we want to be a rural community with a rural feel, there's a different type of land use and land use regulation that may be considered as part of our identity. There's many communities within and around the Metroplex that within their city limits, it is packed with residential subdivisions as tight and as close as you can get them, and the whole city is just a bedroom community with very little commercial or industrial space. That's who they are, and they embraced that. That may not be who Commerce wants to be, and so as we think through who we want to be when we grow up, we need to put some thought into land use and what are the regulations that we're going to adopt that speak to how developers lay out subdivisions, lot size, density, spacing. Those are kind of conversations that come out of a comprehensive plan. Thoughts or questions on that? Okay.
So it will take the ability of what we're used to seeing spot zoning, that takes it away.
Well, spot zoning is illegal in Texas now. And so the current
Find that, what's spot?
So spot zoning is, as an example, we have a neighborhood that's all residential, and there's a single lot in the middle of that residential neighborhood that somebody buys, it's vacant, and they want to put a business on that lot. Well, land use and zoning controls how the land can be used within a geographic zone. And if it's zoned residential, then there are certain types of land use that are allowed, and there are other types of land use that are not allowed.
Like Live Oak, basically.
Live Oak is a commercial corridor, not a residential corridor. And so spot zoning would be someone buys a single lot in the middle of a residential zone, and they want to get it rezoned to be commercial. Well, you can't, under Texas law, rezone a single lot in the middle of another zone. That's spot zoning. It used to happen all the time in Texas. It's illegal, and you can't do it anymore. You can only do a single lot rezone if it's on the boundary or the border of. So if you've got a line on one side's residential and on one side's commercial, you can take one lot and convert it to commercial because it's contiguous and connecting to an existing zone. Spot zoning is just in the middle, all by itself. You've rezoned something with a different land use, and it impacts all the other lots around it. That's spot zoning, and it's not allowed.
So would you do it in the entire city limits? I mean, let's just say farmland that we do not own, it would either be agricultural, undeveloped. I mean, how do you do that with land
That's outside the city limits?
no, within the city limits, but that is maybe agriculture right now?
So then what you would probably do is have it within your land use and zoning regulations that it's agricultural open space right now. And at the time it is going to be developed, then it is rezoned, or there's a planned development district created that lays on top of that ag space what the uses are going to be, and you work with the developer to define that at the time it's being developed. You don't take an active hayfield and say, all right, half of it's residential and half of it's commercial, and we've locked it in. I don't think we can predict the market that well.
But if we did designate areas, I had a piece of property that was agricultural, and then I sold it, but it had been designated as a different, change to residential. Could it still maintain the agricultural?
I believe so, but again, we get to write the land use plan in a way that
Okay.
is consistent with
Well,
the
you just see in the
community we have.
Metroplex, you can see all these apartments and everything, and then you'll see somebody baling hay and cows out
Well,
in the middle. So,
And I will cautiously avoid my soapbox because legislation in Austin this last session removed the city's ability to regulate anything related to farming and agriculture, specifically with the intent that someone within the city, if they wanted to farm their lot, the city has no authority to regulate that regardless of your land use plan and your zoning authority. And so if you wanted to cultivate and farm your property, state legislature took a shot at removing
There's no
that
limit
authority from
on
the city.
the size of it? I mean, there has to be there, I mean, like the goats.
The-
We have to
the-
have a certain amount of,
The Death Star bill
yeah.
removed the city's ability to regulate anything associated with agriculture.
And
So-
agriculture can be raising
Llamas.
llamas or cotton.
Or chickens.
Anything associated with agriculture.
I'm gonna have me a big chicken
And they're
farm.
just trying to protect farmers, or?
It's, again, I will cautiously avoid my soapbox. It's an ideological conversation that gets really complex.
Bunch of legislators that really do.
Well, you have that right outside, right behind that's new subdivision. All of that on Oak Lane and Ashley has agriculture.
But that
Well, I had
speaks to the
chickens,
importance of putting some thought into what your land use plans and your regulations are. Because if you don't have them, developers will come in and just do whatever they want to. And so. Result number 3, research city gateway improvement options. When you first drive into a community, you only get one shot to make a first impression. And so are there projects that the city can do or that we can cooperate with the university or other entities to make improvements to the gateway and the entrances to our community? What are those options? What do they cost? It's most likely going to be in TxDOT right away, so you got to follow TxDOT standards. TxDOT's not going to spend a dime on it. And so we need to put some thought into the reality of our gateways and what it looks like when you drive into our community for the first time. As a case in point, railroad tracks over by Starbucks and Brahms, at some point TxDOT did some landscaping and installed some vegetation up there. Most all of it died during the Snowmageddon. And the maintenance agreement that TxDOT has with the city is that it's the city's responsibility to maintain and replace all of that vegetation. It is not attractive right now. And so when someone drives through town and you see all of this dead vegetation, that usually communicates this is a dead community. And so those are the types of projects that we need to be thinking about. We need to be looking into, are there grants, are there partnerships, are there ways that we can improve that and start affecting the reputation and the identity of our community. Thoughts or questions? Result 4 is very similar to what we had before. Actively promote economic development with residential, commercial, and industrial. Slightly different here in that we want, as a community, to have a reputation within the development community as a desirable and a good place to invest. I'll remind you, within the first, it's hard to overcome. 3 years later, with the work that John and some of the others have done, we have a much better reputation in the development community now than we did 3 years ago. We have to actively cultivate that reputation so that we are a desirable place for people to come and invest their money and their time in residential properties, commercial properties, and industrial properties. We've got to look at all of it. That helps improve the revenue streams, but it also helps speak to the identity that we have as a community as being a desirable location. Thoughts or questions on that one?
Miss Bonnie, how do you market for economic development right now? Yes.
Isn't it the recruitment firm, though, that helps y'all's group find locations, like when you go to California and brings in businesses? Your consultant?
Seems like there might be some synergy between number 1 and number 4 here.
I agree.
Thank you.
Number 5, research and consider locations for public art exhibits. I say this cautiously because with as many success stories as you can find as public art exhibits, you're also going to find some horror stories. But when you consider the university and the art programs that they have, and then I've seen some of the work that the shop and art students do at our high school, I think there's the possibility and there's the potential of some very interesting and or attractive art that can be displayed along the street right-of-ways. And so as you pull into town, if we're wanting to impact the reputation or the identity of our community, and people visit and they come in and they see attractive art exhibits that have been thoughtfully placed and managed, that can help influence the reputation and the identity. As a cautionary tale, I think if this is something to consider, we probably need some kind of professional or semi-professional art jury that judges and identifies what qualifies as being in public spaces and what doesn't. And so our role would simply be to create spaces which are available for art pieces, and then art that's been evaluated and approved can be located there either temporarily and rotated out, or you can have more permanent art exhibits. It can be done in a way that improves the appearance and the reputation of a community. It can also be done tragically, and so
Can we,
Expensively.
can we start with murals?
can.
That would be low-hanging fruit and probably less cost.
I was in McKinney last weekend or a couple of days, and they have some really nice murals. Looks really nice. The art that's presently in the park, how was that come by, do we know?
What art?
The boat archery
Dark art, and then there's that
and the steps.
dog park.
steps.
And the dog park.
Yeah.
That's just,
No, that's.
That was a
archery.
group out of Greenville.
David's
It's a local artist.
David's
Yeah.
Stained glass
He did.
at the
I just
library.
didn't know who did he work with?
But I think it was a county that am I right, Stephanie? A county
Yes.
that raised the fund and they would
Yes.
designate, some
And
expensive
so
art.
much money was given, for each
Yeah.
art.
Well,
them to
and when you engage professional artists to do that, there's usually a substantial cost involved. But if you work with the university and the high school for art students that are working on and developing their skill, you can have a rotation of art pieces that are available at a reduced cost because these are students learning their trade. Other thoughts or suggestions on long-term identity? Are we heading in the right direction for what your intent was for this objective?
I believe so. I think so. And I think it's kind of exciting because starting with that kind of synergizes with the whole festivals and things like that. I mean,
Yep.
starting here.
Yeah.
So,
All right.
forward to-
It's 7 o'clock. Does anybody need to take a brief break
Yes.
before we move on?
Okay, we'll take a 10-minute recess. Be back in 5.